The reading this morning is from the Old Testament, 2 Kings, chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, and then 6 through 14. Now, when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But he said, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. 50 men of the company of prophets also went and stood at some distance from them, as they both were standing by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his mantle and rolled it up and struck the water. The water was parted to the one side and to the other, until the two of them crossed on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you." Elisha said, "Please let me inherit a double share of your spirit." He responded, "You have asked a hard thing. Yet, if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted you. If not, it will not." As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. He picked up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water, saying, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" When he had struck the water was parted to the one side and to the other, and Elisha went over. May God bless our hearing of the scripture.
Acapella, impressive. Thanks for leading us, Jan. Will you pray with me? May the words of my lips and the meditations of each of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our strength and our redeemer. Amen. So I don't know why I always choose the laid-back summer months to start digging into these complicated Old Testament texts. I guess I have a little more time to study it in the summer, to go into the history. I guess I have a little more leeway to experiment. So for this summer, we're going to mess around with the ancient prophets again, like we did with Samuel last summer. So in this passage, we're coming in at a real turning point. The prophet Elijah is, and thank you for that reading, Meredith. This was Elijah and Elisha, why they chose to do that, I do not know. The prophet Elijah is passing the mantle on to Elisha. As usual, it's all very dramatic, heavenly chariots of fire and a very mosaic parting of the sea. But also, as usual, I'm much more interested in the quieter moments. I was really taken by Elisha asking Elijah to grant him a double share of his spirit. So this is alluding to the Mosaic law that says that the firstborn son of a family will receive double the amount of inheritance of his siblings. So this is Elisha being asked to be treated as a firstborn, wanting to receive not riches or land or livestock, but rather just a fraction of Elijah's wise and brave spirit, so that he will be worthy enough to carry on his message and his prophecies. This is Elisha making sure that he has learned enough from his mentor, that he has understood enough from this amazing prophet to sufficiently carry his message on in the world. It's a really touching thing for Elijah to ask, knowing that his mentor will soon be called to God's side. He wants to make sure he's the right person to continue this work. He wants to make sure that he's learned and practiced enough of Elijah's wisdom, patience, and power to be the right person to carry on the mantle. So the whole foundation of our faith is its resurrection, right? It's the fact that Jesus lived and died and overcame death and was resurrected. It's beautiful and it's sacred and it's joyful, but as we've talked about before, it's also pretty unbelievable. It's hard for a lot of us to really understand and really believe in this ultra-rational, science-based world in which we live. But when I was reading this passage last week, and when I was thinking of this really dramatic, but also really respectful and humbling passing of the mantle, I started to think that this is a way to overcome death in a way that we can grasp a little better. This is a way we can make sure the messages of those we've loved and lost can live on. Now, I mentioned a book in a sermon a few weeks ago, Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zahner. The book, to remind you, was a grief memoir about Zahner, who's half white and half Korean, losing her Korean mother to cancer. The book is a grief memoir, but it's also a food memoir. Zahner makes it clear how important her mom's native foods were to keep her own culture alive in America and eventually to pass these skills on to her daughter. Zahner makes it clear that despite her mother's sometimes critical and harsh nature, she always showed her love through food. At one point, shortly after her mom's death, Zahner says she tried grief counseling and therapy, but it wasn't really working for her. And so she canceled her appointments and she went home and she began cooking her mom's favorite traditional meals. She writes, "Every dish I cooked exhumed a memory. Every scent and taste brought me back for a moment to an unravaged home." Zahner lost her mom too early, but she was able to keep her mom's spirit alive in that cooking. She was able to connect with her mom through cooking. She writes a little earlier in the book, "Cooking my mother's food had come to represent an absolute role reversal, a role I was meant to fill. Food was an unspoken language between us, had come to symbolize our return to each other, our bonding, our common ground. A return to each other." Zahner was able to keep her mom's spirit alive through this food, and I believe that this was a way of overcoming death. I believe that we all have ways we can keep our loved ones alive by passing on different forms of love and giving. So my mom, who some of you met a couple weeks back, she's one of 4 siblings, but she is the only one of those 4 siblings who picked up my grandma's talent for knitting. My mom and all her siblings, they each have a Christmas stocking that's knit for them. And it's a pretty elaborate design. There are levels like strips of red, white, and green throughout with different Christmas shapes knitted on each level, gift boxes, wreaths, and candy canes. And on each stocking is the owner's name knitted into the top. And so each of my aunts and uncles have one of these. And as each of them got married, my grandma would knit a new stocking for each new spouse. And as each of those couples had kids, my grandma knitted a stocking for all of them, for all of my cousins. And she did this right up until she died. Her final stocking at probably 89 or 90 was my cousin Scott's wife, Jocelyn. She knit that stocking after they got engaged just months before she died. She sadly didn't make it to their wedding. But since my grandma died, my mom has picked up that mantle. She has knit stockings for Chris, for my cousin Austin's wife, Lucy, for their baby, and now for Scott and Jocelyn's baby. She is carrying on this mantle, this quiet but impressive way of showing love, of keeping this specific kind of love alive. Now, I've always been horrible at knitting, at any kind of craft. I know I've mentioned this before, but I really need to get it together, because if I don't, this mantle dies with my mom. Because this is a way of overcoming death. If you go to any of my aunts or uncles or cousins' houses during December, you will see this unbroken thread of hand-knitted Christmas stockings. The ones belonging to my grandma's kids have been darned, and the white is yellowing, but they are still intact and they still hang on that mantle every Christmas. I dearly hope I still have it in me to receive a double portion of this talent for knitting, to learn enough to carry on the mantle of these stockings hanging on their own respective mantles, keeping my grandma's quiet and loving spirit alive with every stitch. There's so much humility and reverence in Elisha's taking on the mantle. He doesn't take it lightly, because overcoming death is not something to take lightly. And then it's proven that he will succeed when he parts the waters, just as Elijah did before him, and just as Moses did before Elijah. Now, in Crying in H Mart, the way Zona writes about her mom's cooking and her cooking after her mom dies, that's almost meditative, it's almost prayerful. There's so much reverence to it. Listen to this description of cooking a meal she remembers her mom making. Just like mom, chopsticks in one hand, scissors in the other, cutting galbi and cold noodles with a specifically Korean ambidextrous precision, skillfully stretching out the meat with her right hand and cutting it into bite-sized pieces with her left, using kitchen scissors like a warrior brandishes a weapon. She does not take it lightly, because in cooking these meals, she is keeping her mom's spirit alive. In cooking these meals, she is overcoming death. There is resurrection in those meals, and that is not something to take lightly. So this is when I ask for your insights. This is when I ask for your help finishing this sermon today. I want to invite anyone who would like to share about a mantle you have picked up from a loved one, a mantle you've passed on or hope to pass on. It could be from someone who has died or someone who is still alive. It could be something you've passed on or hope to pass on to a son, a daughter, a friend, a niece, a nephew. It could be something you've received from a friend, a mentor, or a parent, a talent, a demeanor, a lesson, anything. And Zoom folks could type in things if you'd like, but I would ask, if you're comfortable, for folks here to come up to the pulpit and share if you want to share, just because if you're really not comfortable, I'll do my best to do you guys justice for the Zoom folks. But I just think it would make it a lot more meaningful if you guys were able to come up here. The floor is yours now. If anyone's brave enough.
Okay.
Thanks, Linda.
I guess you could turn the mic this way so you don't have to be behind the pulpit. We could not feel
That's
that.
true. I can do that.
Yeah.
I will.
Doesn't
Yes.
feel this.
There you go.
I guess one of the things that has always been in my family has been the love of Cape Cod. And so I can have very many memories of my mom would always find some place for a week that we would all go to Cape Cod to have that family together, because my dad's business was very busy in the summer, and to get him away from his business was a chore. So for all of us to go to Cape Cod was quite the fun time of the summer. Now, my attraction to Cape Cod is also that right now we are at the family house that has been in our family for 50 years. And so as my parents got older, I took on the mantle of keeping the family house in Cape Cod so that everyone could have a place to come together and enjoy this week that we always did. So I guess I'm taking on the mantle of keeping the Cape Cod family house going.
Thank you, Brenda.
I'll take the mic here. So, when my dad died, he was relatively young, and it became my job to take care of, look after, or be helpful to my mother, who grew up in a generation where women were not independent. And so we moved her up here. She was here for 20 years. The other thing that I thought of was how we are preparing our kids to take care of us. They've had a few scares, and so it's on their minds, I know. They really don't need to do anything now. However, it's on their minds so that when the time comes that we need them, they will not be surprised. So those are the two things that I thought of.
Thank you, Sue.
Hello. One thing that I've taken on is, well, I'll give you a little backstory. My dad's one of 9 children, and my mother had only a brother when I was growing up. So it was very difficult to get my dad's side of the family together for the holidays. So we always spent Thanksgiving and Christmas with my mom's brother and his family. And Thanksgiving was always at my aunt and uncle's house in White River. And Christmas Eve was always at my parents' house in Heartland. So as the family expanded with wives and husbands and grandchildren and what have you, Thanksgiving kind of separated itself out a little bit amongst the spouses. But the one tradition we've always had in my family since I was born is Christmas Eve. And my aunt and uncle and cousins used to come, but they've all kind of moved. So Christmas Eve is the unbroken tradition in my family. I lived in Texas for 13 years, so I didn't make it every year in the last 15 or so, but I moved back here 2 years ago. And my parents' house is a little bit small, and there's a lot more of us now than there was when I was growing up. So when we bought our house, it came with this really great big living room and an open kitchen area. So my husband and I have now taken on the mantle of Christmas Eve, and I'm really happy to be able to do that. Takes the burden off my mom, fits everybody in, and it's just as joyful as it ever was.
Thank you, Rebecca.
First, not a tradition, but thanks to the 2 fire boys, Thomas and Scott, and my husband, just got Shiloh for you. I had a tradition all the time of, my dad was an Army Sergeant Major, so everybody clashed in our family all the time, because there was all of us that were, I only had one sibling, and we were always too strong for each other. So we weren't huggy, touchy, feeling people, we just said it like it was. And then it got to the point where my dad was really sick. And we ended up talking about, at a meal, talking about a meal, what makes everybody happy around here? What has somebody done that has impacted your life outside of our family? And they didn't want to do it first. And then we've been doing this now for, I don't know, 15 years, I think. And then it carried on to our workplaces. So when we share a meal and we ask people, because there's too much discourse, I guess, out there, and we want to have kindness. So we want to say, what has somebody done to make your life better? And that little simple thing alone gets people talking, and usually the one that wants to share the most doesn't say anything until the end. And then when that person says something, that's very impactful. So we hope that more people carry on kindness and think about what other people have done that is good in this world and what's happened to you to share. And that's how we lead it. So every year I have to start, I don't know why, every single year, but keep the tradition going.
Amen. Anyone, any mantles on Zoom? Does anyone else have anything before? That was a lovely one to end on, so. Thank you all so much for sharing your mantles that you are passing and carrying on. Thank you all for truly embracing the spirit of resurrection. Amen.